Was I wrong 4 years ago about this mic, the AudioTechnica AT2040? Was it actually good? Or was my slightly influenced review not legit and prone to bias? Ooh, spicy. Okay, so 4 years ago was a very different time, right? I mean, it was actually around 5 years ago, 2021, my birthday, that I reviewed the AudioTechnica AT2040. And to give you perspective on how long ago that was, but in audio terms, it was a lot simpler of a time. The original Rodecaster Pro was still chugging along as the top choice for podcasters. And there was this totally new kind of audio gear that was well outside the consumer/prosumer gear. This stuff was called podcasting gear. This was the gear that the weekend podcast warrior needed for the best shot at being the next Joe Rogan. And for the most part, it was all intended to make the journey into production easier and simpler for everyone. And that was a path that was forged by Rode, who had been on the podcasting train since around 2009 with something called the Procaster. They were even one of the first on the podcast mic train with the Pod Mic in 2018. And of course, Rode's business model is all about being the market leader and market disruptor, meaning that everyone else is in the role of catch-up, and that's what companies did. And they latched onto the podcast branding and absolutely ran with it. But something weird started to happen. Podcasting gear wasn't cool enough, so companies started using broadcast as their terminology. Now, I get it. Companies got to sell, they got to hustle, and they got to do some finagling with their marketing to stand out. Every company does it because not only were they up against the Rode juggernaut, but they also had to concern themselves with everyone else that was doing the exact same thing as them, trying to catch up to Rode. But this is also where companies started stepping over the line with some of those tactics. They basically wanted their piece of the pie, and that piece was your money. Now, I'm not going to sit here and call anyone out, but this was one of the ways they did it with broadcasting gear, which was just silly, and I think the overload at the time started to kind of annoy me. This was just a bunch of companies packaging up products that weren't intended to make you better or make the process easier. It was just so they could capture your money, offering nothing more than just another crap option in the market. So where was I coming from then? Well, going back and watching it, I gotta say, damn, have I ever gotten better at presenting? But also, this was a bit of a weird one for me. You see, Audio-Technica already had a broadcast podcast mic, and not a lot of people knew about it. It was called the BP40, and it was released back in 2015 at NAB. Basically a competitor to the RA20 and the SM7B, and it was priced competitively to them as well. But if you've never really heard of that microphone, it's probably because it wasn't all that great and it was just wildly boosted in the mids to try to make you hear your voice better. And while this mic actually sounds better than the BP40, still wasn't all that great. And that's where my issues began. I even spotlighted my wife in that video for a representation for women's voices, and it sounded awful.
Now, I know a lot of people had wanted to get to know me better, or do they? And I always seem to do these videos after mowing the lawn and going for a run. So in that beautiful spirit, I will answer some questions that have come through in no particular order. No, I'm not going to do that. Yes. 5. Green frogs go ribbit. Only when the mood is up do I catch babies. And 42.
And, wait for it, honky. It was literally tuned to outshine the relatively dull-sounding SM7B here, and it was aimed at people that had little knowledge of audio and wouldn't be EQing. But instead of giving us a microphone that was just clear and perhaps a bit airy, they gave you a mic that would actually be harder to EQ for beginners, which was a really odd choice. Let's take a look at the off-axis rejection of the AT2040. This is me speaking directly into the front of the microphone from about 5 inches away. Now I'm speaking directly into the side of the microphone from about 5 inches away. And this is where the microphone kind of falls apart. And now I'm speaking into the rear of the microphone from about 5 inches away. We've got the AT2040, we've got the SM58. We're going to go back and forth between them. And this one's important because it shows the quality of sound between an SM58 and an AT2040. This one basically boosted in the honks. This one has some boosts in the higher, the airy portion of the frequency response. Which one do you like as I go back and forth between them? Now we have the AT2040 up against the Rode PodMic. And this is the microphone that everyone was trying to copy back then. AT2040, Rode PodMic. Which one do you like? Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the handling noise, resonant frequencies that this microphone gives off. But we're starting with the PodMic. And there's a very important reason I want to start with the PodMic. This microphone isn't perfect. Let's put some headphones on. And when you actually check the resonance of this microphone, this is the Rode PSA 1 Plus, there's a little bit of resonant frequency in there. And you can actually hear the buzzing of my light up here. Sorry about that. But resonant frequency, and that's pretty normal. This table also has a lot of like bumps and thumps in it. It's not properly put together. It's a long story with this table. I do have to replace it at some point. But that's a normal microphone. Let's move to the AT2040. Okay, so now we have the AT2040 plugged in, and that's your first guess. One of the reasons I've been trying to keep my hands off the desk for this review is this. Okay, so you heard me knock the table with this, the PodMic. Bumps and thumps in it. Now we're just going to, on the same boom arm, I'm just tapping it. How bad is that? That is probably the worst resonance I've ever heard out of a microphone. It's the worst handling noise out of any microphone. A roll-off is going to help you with a lot of this, but come on. So then what about now? Well, nothing's really changed. Perhaps I'm less annoyed with the concept of companies piggybacking on the idea of being broadcast. But I think it's fair as consumers for us to ask for more, not just slop thrown at us in an attempt for us to drop money on the latest shiny. Now, I can say since the podcast boom of 2020 is well behind us, companies are less willing to just roll out crap to try and stay current, and I think it's less of an issue these days. But it's always a good reminder, something that one of my listeners reminded me of on our last live stream. Companies don't love you. They're just pretending to for your money. Make them earn your money. Hold them to a standard, because cheap shouldn't be the only factor in purchasing something like a microphone. I said it before and I'll say it again. If you can get better sound out of an SM58 or really any other handheld microphone, spending more on a microphone like this is literally throwing your money away, which I guess at this point I should get to specifically why I don't like this microphone, though I did touch on it earlier. First, it's EQ'd to make you sound like you're only talking through your nose. Second, it is a hypercardioid, which is awesome for multi-mic setups, but it sounds more like a cardioid with a horrific off-axis rejection. And thirdly, it can't handle any handling. This thing is horrific at any and all handling. And here's a hint for that. When you see the company offering a shock mount to buy on top of the $100+ microphone, that's a warning sign. So, though I wasn't as articulate back in the day, 4.5 years ago, I can say this. I was right about this microphone. It is a waste of your money. But I do have to ask, do you think I got a review wrong in the past other than this one? Should I revisit one of my bigger oofs, as they say? Let me know down below. Cheers, guys. Thanks for watching.